That was met, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to the beach that one time, and I think we met another time after
And
that.
then when I visited, we went to a party at your house.
Oh, good.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Yes.
Halloween. We were dressed like Weird Al.
Yeah.
Yes, that was really, really good.
That was so good.
Yeah.
That was really fun.
God, I was really fucked up. It was also my 30th birthday.
You were.
Also, I am always very
fucked
fucked up.
You were in a great mood.
Wait.
Yeah, I was having a great time.
You were dressed as Weird Al?
And I was also dressed as Weird Al.
Oh,
and then Luke was also dressed as Weird Al.
That's amazing.
Was this when Julie came in and surprised you and you went,
Yeah, that's when I freaked out.
Yeah.
It was one of the best days of my life.
That was really
Probably still better than my wedding will be.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, for sure.
I got you a cake that my friend made.
It was awesome.
She was decorating it, and she was like, "Should it say anything?" And just off the top of my head, I thought of your like horror cunt joke.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Oh yeah, it'd be funny if it said horror cunt," because it was like Halloween too. And then she sent me a picture. It ended up actually saying horror cunt, but the first one she sent a picture of was just like terrible pussy. No, got it wrong.
Terrible pussy. That's so funny. Oh man.
That was a good ass cake though. Shout out Elise.
It was good. My cake yesterday. Oh, go.
No, keep it.
The cake I had for my bridal shower had a headless woman on it.
Yeah, it looked like a ballroom ghost.
It was so weird. It just said Mary Devon, and then it had like a white corset, and that was it. And I don't know.
Mary Devon, like to wed, or
no, just my name.
Okay, so
it just said Mary Devon. It didn't say congratulations. It just said my name. And then
it is your birthday.
Yeah. And then there was a headless there was just a headless torso corset thing, and it's all pink and very decorative, and it was just so ridiculous. But I mean, it was really pretty. It was a well-made cake, but it was so dumb.
And it wasn't supposed to be funny.
No, it was not supposed to be funny.
Okay, that's a good
It
question.
definitely was.
It's helpful.
Shotzi was telling people that she was meeting for the first time. She was like, I was going to get her lingerie, but I heard people sleep naked now. So I got her a juicer, and it's too big, and I hate it. So anyway,
Did people not sleep naked in the past?
No, Shotzi.
Not if you're a housewife.
Grandmothers are obsessed with getting you lingerie. I don't know why.
What?
Yeah, my
That's-
grandmothers were obsessed with getting me lingerie. They're like, yeah, I want to get you lingerie. It's your bridal shower.
On both
and I was
sides?
like,
That's
yeah.
traditional. That's
And
the thing.
it is a traditional thing, but I was like, yeah, but that's weird, y'all. Like, I don't know. I just think it's weird. And I'm like, how are y'all okay with this and I'm not?
Because then you get to be like, ooh, when
Right.
you know, the like moment that everybody wants at a party.
Anyway, it was weird. Is my mic? Oh no, my earphones aren't on.
Oh, I might have not plugged you in. No, maybe not. Give me your headphones. I think you're having a heat stroke. Is what's probably happening. Yeah, I can speak.
Okay, hi. You can hear this mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear it as well as the other mics?
When you lean in like that.
All right,
yeah.
fine. I'll just lean in more.
Yeah.
Lean in, Mary.
Like Sheryl Sandberg.
Lean right in.
Is it gross y'all done putting my seeds right there?
It's not great, but it does.
All right, fine.
Wait, so is the lean in thing?
No, where else
She
are you?
was
Just
seriously
put it
just
in.
talking about like you should go like be closer to people at meetings, or what does that lean in even mean? Because I get like the general vibe
I
of
think
what
it
that
means-
is, but like
The whole idea was like women are I don't know. It made no sense.
quit slouching.
I think it was like women are like you should ask for a raise or you should
Right.
like acknowledge your
Basically, if you're getting
Subjugation.
if there's a pay gap,
Right,
it's your fault.
exactly. Yeah.
It's
well, I mean, I get that part of
Yeah.
it, but like, what does that have to do with leaning?
Oh, I think it's like instead of bucking the system and trying to change it, it's like lean into the
yeah.
system.
It's kind of like work harder and be more perform masculinity.
It's a
those
cool-
those
yeah.
are the key themes.
Right.
it's basic. Yeah, it's
Sip codeine at work.
give up is what it should be called.
Yeah.
Drink lean.
Also,
Oh,
yeah.
that's funny.
Man, one of our friends was telling me about there was a girl boss rally. What?
I'm just thinking of Sheryl Sandberg on Lean,
Oh, that's amazing.
or like Paul Wall
Lean
saying
rules.
"Lean in."
Did y'all ever do lean?
Yeah,
No.
and
It's promethazine and codeine,
Yeah.
right? They gave it to us at LSU. Do you remember that when they gave it to everyone at LSU every time you like had a cough?
Oh, that's awesome.
It fucking rules.
They wouldn't give you Adderall, but they would give you lean.
Yeah, they gave us lean all
Because
the freshman year.
you already had Adderall.
We just all had lean, and we were all fucked up all the time. I remember the first time I did it, I was like basically sitting in a pretzel, and I was like, I don't feel anything, and they were like, your leg is behind your head. But yeah, we would like roll blunts.
You've been freestyle rapping for 4 hours.
Oh man, then LSU realized they were giving us all narcotics and stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just had to be like, and they were like, here you go, scissor or whatever. Is scissor different? What's scissor?
I think it's
believe
basically
it's
the same shit.
Okay.
There might be
It's
like,
like I think that is so like promethazine and codeine I think is lean, and then I'm going way outside my
it's like
lane,
the
but I think
Sprite to Mellow Yellow.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say Sprite and Jolly Ranchers is the other two ingredients.
Oh, okay.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, I was just comparing lean and scissor to Sprite and Mellow Yellow. Mellow Yellow is Sprite, right?
I think it's off-brand Sprite.
Yeah,
Is it?
it's like the same thing.
I just think about I don't think I drink it at all because it just makes me think piss. I'm drinking piss. It's
Yeah.
That song, Mellow Yellow, the Donovan
They call
song.
me Mellow Yellow. Yeah.
Apparently, my dad was one of the idiot hippies who thought that song was about smoking banana peels and tried to do it.
There's a funeral home on Veterans in Metairie called Lamanna Panafallo, and every time me and my dad drove past it, we would be like, Lamanna Panafallo.
That's a good dad joke.
Yeah. Singing Donovan with your paw. Yeah. That's something you would do.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Seems on brand.
very much so.
Brand aligned.
Yeah, we smoked banana peels together. He taught me. He told me that when I was like 8.
I learned it from you, Dad.
I just keep slipping. Like fucking Sideshow Bob. It's just banana peels littering the floor of this fucked up little apartment I'm in.
So who was horny at the wedding you were at last night? Were you going to segue into that when you said...
No comment.
Okay.
However, I will say that I went to the wedding covered in my own urine.
Okay.
And I was stone cold sober. This is in the group chat. Don't
I
act
thought you
surprised.
meant a long time ago.
Yeah,
Oh
same.
no. Okay,
Yeah.
so this was I was currently covered in urine while I was texting you that. So basically, I did not do any.
It was your urine?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Whose wedding is this?
my
Just set
cousin.
the scene. Okay.
My cousin who listens to the podcast.
Great.
So she's
Wait, before we forget to do it, our guest is Daria Reaven. We'll talk about, things you actually know
We'll
about
let you
soon.
talk
but
soon.
We're going to talk
don't
about
need to.
piss for a while.
I know about piss.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can talk about piss. I can listen to people talk about piss very well.
Well, get ready. So, did you have something that you wanted to contribute? You
No,
just-
I still... Okay, now I believe my mic is on.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
it's fine. Go.
I'll turn you up.
Okay.
So yesterday, I basically Susanna reminded me that the wedding was yesterday, the day before yesterday, and it was on my calendar. I would have figured it out. I wouldn't have missed it.
Right.
But I was like, oh, I should probably iron my one shirt. And so I Googled how to iron a shirt.
Damn, I've never ironed a shirt
And-
once.
and-
I have a
Once.
steamer. I can't iron.
So I
Wait, I just put
It's handheld. It's so easy.
That's
I
cool.
just put my shirt in the bathroom
While you're
and take a
showering,
shower.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That does not work for me.
me
Yeah.
neither.
In New Orleans too, you don't really need to iron your clothes. You can just walk outside and it's like
Our clothes get really gross because we never hang or fold our clothes.
Yeah.
So they just sit in a pile until we're ready to wear them, and they're just like this.
and there's a bunch of cat piss and Michael piss all over them.
Right? Yeah.
So-
Michael comes into our house and pisses at night.
I iron my shirt. It takes me an hour. and then I hang up the shirt and I'm like, okay, I'm good. Also, by the way, the collar is just brown. It's just because the only time I ever wear that shit is the only time I ever wear like a formal, semi-formal, whatever shirt is things where you dance.
Yeah.
So it's just soaked in sweat.
Gross.
It's super fucking dingy. I mean, like all the visible parts are not dingy, but it's
Yeah.
dingy as hell.
Let's buy Michael a shirt.
The collar is
let's
visible.
Chip in.
The inside of the collar. Oh. Yeah. So I basically sacrificed the shirt because it was like stained, and I was like, I need to fluff this up, so I put it in the dryer, which sets the stains, right? So then I iron it. It takes me forever, and then I Oh yeah, I put on all the suit just to make sure I have all the pieces, parts, and then I take it off. I hang everything up. And I'm like, okay, I'm set. I set an alarm for an hour before because that's how long it takes me to put on a suit because I'm so dumb. So I put on the suit, and it's a very nice like internet suit. That like the fabric's really nice. The construction's dog shit, but the fabric is really nice, and it's like pretty high waisted. And I don't really wear particularly high waisted trousers very often. And so I had to pee before I called the lift, and I went to the bathroom. And I didn't understand this, but high-waisted pants, the zipper does not go down far enough for you to whip it out without unbuttoning the pants. And so, but I was like, surely
So you're through the window, not over the fence.
Exactly.
Kind of pisser.
Yeah.
All right.
So I am like, surely people just do it. So I was like, okay, it's like a tube or a pipe. It's flexible.
I could just.
So I was
You're talking about your cock.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I just kind of poked it up and forward, right? And just kind of a 90-degree angle. And so I peed, and it was kind of working, but it hurt for some mysterious reason.
Yeah, you're not supposed to take a right turn.
So it hurt, and I was like, okay. So I like sort of finished peeing, but my dick hurt, and I was like, all right, I guess I'm finished. And then
And then you invented like a hose that was still peeing.
so
It's like when you turn a hose off and it's like bloop.
yeah, so
There's like a little kink in his cock, and he just.
Yeah, you tied your cock in a bow.
right, and so I immediately like kind of like pulled my wang back into my underwear and immediately just pissed my pants. So luckily most of the urine went into my underwear, which I then changed, so mostly that was fine. It didn't really get on any of the suit. It was just the shirt was soaked.
This part
the
of
part
the shirt.
the part of the shirt that was
Soaked?
tucked in.
Did you rinse it with water?
That would have been a good idea. So
Because if you had rinsed it with water and then dabbed it off, it could have been okay.
right. So I was like, I was in panic mode at this time.
sure.
I was running late, and I was just like, okay, I don't have a blow dryer. I luckily was fairly hydrated, so I was like, probably it didn't stain.
Oh
and
my god, the smell of blow drying piss would have been so
Again,
bad.
I know. I was like, the smell was a concern, and I almost just like switched shirts. But like, it's the only even remotely appropriate shirt.
You couldn't wear your English major shirt?
No,
Why?
because it's buttoned down. That's not formal enough.
Oh, you had to wear a tux? What'd
No.
you wear? Oh,
It doesn't matter.
okay.
It's the hang up that I have.
Okay.
But anyway, so yeah, in retrospect, maybe change shirts.
Yeah.
However, I was not in the best frame of mind, and so I was like, okay, I don't have a blow dryer. So I tried standing in front of the air conditioner with my shirt.
With your piss shirt.
With my
You
piss
tried
shirt
to make
in
a little tent.
in front of my face, and I was like, this isn't working. And I was like, I know what I'll do.
Uh-oh.
And I took off the
Ironed
shirt
it?
and I ironed the
You
piss
ironed a wet piss shirt?
into the shirt.
Can I see the shirt? Is it
Yeah.
yellow?
No.
It's not yellow?
No.
Does it smell?
I don't think so. You can smell it. I mean, like,
I don't want to smell it.
Yeah, no, don't.
But I want you to
Don't
smell
even
it.
offer. That's insane.
This is incredible.
We're about to talk about the death penalty, which you should only get if you're walk
Michael
out of your
Glaviano.
house covered in piss.
Yeah.
Knowingly.
Mandatory minimum
You have a home
sentence is
and other shirts, and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to go to great lengths to wear this shirt that I've covered in piss and then dried it in there with various temperatures.
I'm gonna save everyone some time and just say there is a stain.
There's Show the shirt. Show the shirt.
Never.
You should just burn down your house. Like fuck
I'm
that.
gonna pee.
All right, whatever. It
You
didn't.
wore it fully for the whole wedding.
Yes.
Wow.
I asked my sister if I smelled like piss, and she said no.
Really?
Yeah.
Is she a liar?
Is she, yeah, what do we know about your
No.
sister?
My sister is the most frank person I've ever met in my life, and if you say something like, "Do I suck?" and you do suck, she'll say, "Yes, you suck." So I trust her. I don't think I smelled like this, but
Wow. Wow. Was it an outdoor wedding?
no, I wish it was a completely unventilated space.
Is it the one on top of that chair? I couldn't find the stain.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it is.
It was just, there was like It was so wrinkled at the bottom, I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
I didn't smell it, though. I'm not that disgusting.
Yeah. So ironing piss into my shirt is definitely a low point in my life, but I get through the day.
Was the wedding fun?
It was really fun. Yeah, it was at a catering space at the Lakefront Airport. Messina's at the terminal.
Oh my God, I love that place.
Dude.
We looked at it for our wedding.
Susanna works at a really, really nice catering place, and the food there is better.
Yeah.
It's so fucking good.
Man. Yeah, the Lakefront Airport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so good. And since they renovated it, it looks really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to eating probably just rice at your wedding, or what's the...
No, we have a pasta station that has... What's the vegetarian pasta that they always have at events like this? Pasta Primavera. It's
I don't
sun-dried,
get invited to
Sun-dried
stuff like that. Except
It's like
for
sun-dried
you.
tomatoes and cheese and spinach on pasta.
I mean, it'll be good. I'll probably be on drugs anyway, so I won't want to eat that much.
Are you going to be on Molly?
After you're in the wedding, right?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay.
No,
All right.
me and Shotzi are fucking snorting rails.
That means she would die, which you'd make my mom very happy.
That's my gift to you, is
Yeah,
making your
killing-
mother
yeah.
happy by killing her mother.
Yeah.
So who's our guest?
Yeah, let's get off this. Daria Reaven, my longtime great friend and expert in death. That's your whole intro. But actually, do you want to just kind of go over like the work that you've been doing for the past 8 years? Just the sort of it's been in the same general field, but you've come at it from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah. Sure. So I've been a criminal defense investigator since I graduated college in 2012. The first year I was just working at a public defender's office in DC. So just your standard gun crimes and parole and things getting trained up, and it was fine. DC is a shithole, but other than that, it was great. And then I came to New Orleans and I investigated conditions at the Orleans Parish Prison, which is the jail here in New Orleans.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So criminal defense investigators basically like digging up, contextualizing information for whatever someone is being prosecuted for?
Yes, and for death penalty cases, it's a little bit more involved than that, which I can talk about in a second.
Okay.
But for cases where there's not mitigation presented, it's just the facts of the crime. So you're trying to prove a range of claims related to the facts of a incident, basically.
Okay,
Yeah.
go on.
But the jail conditions investigation was quite different. That was there was a class action lawsuit on behalf of everyone who's incarcerated at the jail here in New Orleans related to the fucking terrible conditions
Right.
of OPP. So that involved just being in the jail every day, interviewing people about assaults that happened, knifings.
The specific
sexual
conditions,
assaults.
a lot of them were like overcrowding and not moving people to safer tiers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it had to do with overcrowding, but also had to do with this horrible quality of medical care and mental health care and, safety issues. Really everything that can go wrong in a jail and does go wrong in a jail went wrong in that jail and continues to. And then I became a mitigation specialist and investigator on death penalty cases. And the way death penalty cases are different from other kinds of crimes are that death penalty trials are bifurcated into two parts. So there's the guilt phase, which is like any other trial for a crime where you're just trying to determine if the person is innocent or guilty. And then the second half is just basically presenting any evidence that argues your client is a human being who doesn't deserve to be executed. So that's obviously pretty broad.
And this is the only kind of sentence where that happens.
Kind of, to that extent, for sure. So there's like, for death penalty cases, your goal is to go back 3 generations in your client's life, which is pretty unusual. So sometimes there's like character evidence that's presented in other kinds of crimes. So kids often have a lot of sort of character stuff presented about them. And I think the only time it really comes up is in sentencing. So you'll typically see stuff where it's like, oh, that so-and-so has a job, they have a family to go back to. It's about evaluating stability, essentially, which is very different from evaluating whether or not someone deserves to be killed by the state. So those are different kinds of things, but yeah.
There's a really good article in The Nation after the Boston bombing about Tsarnaev's is like I can't remember the name of it. It's extremely fucking good. And that's where I first learned about
Charlotte Holdman was his mitigation specialist.
So it was so fucking good. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's all. She was she's legendary Louisiana mitigations. She invented mitigation, essentially, the woman who was the investigator on his case. And she passed away a few years ago. But
what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What does what mean?
Invented mitigation.
Great question. So essentially, before this woman came into the scene and before mitigation was a thing, we really determined whether or not we wanted to execute somebody, we being the state, just by like fucking political whim, essentially. Just like, do we care enough to execute this person? And usually it's like almost always the answer is like, yeah, let's fucking kill him. Like at that point, you know. And then slowly, I think there were more compelling arguments as sort of, reformist agendas have moved in a variety of ways that maybe it's worth considering context in particular situations, especially as evidence around mental illness and mental health became more prevalent in terms of evaluating insanity, which is a really high legal standard to get a not guilty verdict. But sort of there was more space given for, even though you're guilty, right? If you're guilty, there might be other things that people want to consider, and that the category of that sort of ballooned out. And once that ballooned out, there was a lot of space to argue for all kinds of other things to be considered.
When did that start happening?
I'm not totally sure, but I feel like the 90s was still a pretty rough time. I mean, it's still bad. It's one of those things where it's kind of frustrating because there's a tendency to be like, and now we're in a place where it's like, it's still fucking terrible. And I don't think mitigation is still done well a lot of the time. But I think probably late 90s, mid to late 90s would be when you're looking more at sort of history of slavery, sharecropping, like you're really looking at family history and state violence over time as being something to consider, which wasn't true before.
So that's what you mean by going back generations, just like circumstances that led this person to that moment.
Yeah, and like familial patterns around abuse, trauma, mental health, all that kind of stuff is very relevant. Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy that people that are even willing to consider the death penalty at all have to take that kind of evidence into account and then still say the words like death, like we should kill them at a certain point. Like that, those two spheres ever even like interact. Because it's like, if you have any context around like history and mental health, like that's such a separate world from like just pure vengeance, which I don't think there's really any argument for the death penalty besides vengeance, besides like, I guess some people probably claim like deterrence, right?
Some people do, but that's really,
I mean, it's like statistically,
like people know it's a weak argument now, which is helpful.
I think you kind of have to admit that you just want to see people die. But the standards, I understand, I'm not playing devil's advocate or anything. Like, I still think the death penalty shouldn't exist, but have the standards, like, is the death penalty generally in Louisiana given for particularly heinous crimes, or it can be pretty much any murder?
Yeah, pretty much in Louisiana, if you're black and you commit murder,
right?
Yeah,
it's pretty much it's on the table. But Louisiana hasn't executed somebody in a long time, so Louisiana is actually sort of unusual in the context of the South, in the sense that people are still being sentenced to death, and Shreveport, Caddo Parish was one of the highest producers of death sentences. But there's not a lot of political will, which now I'm like, fuck, I don't want to say this because then people are gonna be like, oh yeah, we should start. But no, the Louisiana advocates here have been really, really effective at stopping executions themselves, which is great. And there's a lot of really excellent lawyers in this state. And in other southern states where people are actively being executed, it's different, like Texas, Florida, Alabama.
And is it happening all over the country, or is it just Louisiana? I feel like I see every few weeks that in Louisiana, a black man has been exonerated after like 45 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. Maybe I'm seeing the same articles a lot, but it just seems like it's a lot. It's happening a lot in Louisiana, where people just spend their whole lives on death row, and they don't get murdered by the state, which is good, but it's also really sad that So how does that work? If you're on death row, how do you continue to appeal your case so that you get that help? Like, How is that happening?
Mm-hmm.
Is anyone just sitting there and having their case not investigated that is innocent?
So when you get sentenced to death, the government is interested in like checking a lot of boxes to make sure that like they're really sure you're a monster, quote unquote, right? And so there's a very lengthy appeals process for folks who've been sentenced to death. So everybody is assigned a lawyer. So yeah, your case is continually investigated. That's not to say that it's effectively investigated or investigated well or litigated well, or really, it's not a guarantee of anything other than that the process drudges on for a long time.
And that's why it takes 45 years for people to be exonerated when they are,
And you're right, Louisiana has the highest exonerations per capita, I think, of any state in the country.
What a weird, horrible...
Stat.
Yeah.
Fun stat. Yeah.
Do you have a ballpark figure on how long it's been since we've put anyone to death in Louisiana?
Yeah, the last person was a volunteer, which means that he was asking the state to execute him, and that was in 2012, but I should double check that before I spout off some shit. But yeah,
but like roughly that time frame.
Around around that time.
So also you've worked in like the I don't know how to say it, but like you've worked around death penalty cases in different contexts.
Yeah. So I was an investigator for years, and then I went to get my master's, and now for the last year and a half, I just stopped doing this. But I was doing policy work to work with state legislatures to abolish the death penalty or limit the use of the death penalty. Yeah. So that was much more of policy, working with legislators.
It seems like there's like a couple different strategies for going at getting people to not be killed by the state, and like it seems like the moral argument is probably the strongest one, just trying to get as many people to sign on to like this is like insane that we're even considering it in the modern world. And then there's like other sort of like piecemeal like legislative fights to try and like stop things incrementally.
Yeah.
I guess what do you think about the differences between those two approaches?
Yeah. I definitely feel like I feel pretty differently about this than a lot of folks in the field, which has been an issue for me for sure. Because I think a lot of folks in a lot of issues like this with harm reduction in general, the argument goes that it doesn't matter how we abolish X or how we get done X as long as it's done. Like people will benefit from having this institution or this, be it ICE or whatever it is, completely gone. Whereas I think, especially with the death penalty being as it's an incredibly symbolic act really at this point, like it's sort of the pointy end of the criminal justice system, that it really matters the story that we're telling about how we abolish it is very significant, in the sense that if you abolish it because it's too difficult or it's inconvenient for states or there's
it's
business
pricey.
issues, or it's
Money,
pricey,
There's
or
like
it's
major
public
ideological
health,
repercussions.
It's like then you're fucking yourself for life without parole. You're fucking yourself for every other every other punitive system on the line. If that's the story you tell about why we shouldn't have the death penalties because we can't get it right,
Right.
it's like fuck that. We're fucking ourselves.
So you're sort of just viewing it as the most egregious piece of a completely immoral system. So you don't want to just try to focus on just the death penalty.
Yeah, I think that we have to be making connections between for what the death penalty represents about everything else. Because if you just treat it in a vacuum, then I think it's really it's not.
And it's also pretty fucked up that that death row and prison is so bad that guy was like, kill me. That they're I mean, I can see that, and that was like an argument at Catholic school. People love to talk about death penalty and the A word, and so we would write papers about it, and there was like pro death penalty. I mean, this is high school because it was Catholic.
The
high
A
school.
word?
You know the other one, yeah. I don't want to even bring it up in the context of the death penalty.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. But
people connect them all the time.
I thought you meant adultery.
I hate it. Oh,
it's terrible.
So yeah, I don't want to get too deep into that. I just wanted to say that like people love to talk about shit. I lost it.
Sorry.
No, but you were saying it working or it being, I forgot exactly what it was. Oh yeah, people would always say, people who were arguing like making a concession for their side to try to like, side with pro death penalty people, they'd be like, I mean, it's a lot of people want the death penalty because prison's so bad, and it's like, well, that's also not
awesome.
Yeah. But also we were in high school. We were just trying to debate things. But yeah, it's It's pretty crazy that.
Yeah, there's one case of this that's come up recently with this guy who's coming up for an execution. What state is he in? This is a very famous case. I should know this. I want to say Tennessee, but I think that's wrong. Anyway, he's a gay man, and he was sentenced to death. And part of the rationale that the jury gave for sentencing him to death was that they thought because he's gay that he would enjoy being in prison.
Oh my
for
God.
having sex with men, and that it was because of that they didn't want to let him have that, and so they wanted to sentence him to death for that.
When did they come up with that? How long has he
Not
been?
that long.
Not
ago.
that long.
Not
like
that long
few
ago. Definitely
years?
in the 2000s. Yeah.
I assume at lunch at a middle school is when
yeah.
they came up with that. That's crazy that an
Yeah.
adult could say that in any
Yeah.
sort of professional context.
Yeah.
Like,
And it just gives you so much information about what they think the purpose of the justice
System is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I also think it sort of highlights like how in our psyche, like so much of what society like views prisons as is like just a place where rape happens, and that like that's kind of acceptable to people and part of it.
like
Yeah.
part of the deterrent effect or whatever.
Part of
Yeah.
the punitive effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
That
It's something that you like. Yeah, it's something that people deserve when they're less than human. Yeah. And that's what they are to people. Like, that's what prisoners are to people.
Speaking of punitive versus different thoughts about the justice, like what is the state of restorative justice activism in Louisiana right now?
In Louisiana, I haven't worked in this state in a while, but I'm sure that things are advancing here in a positive way. But I mean, restorative justice is...
Where are you at?
I'm in Colorado right now, and I'm moving to New York in August.
Boy,
so
I sure did
bouncing
not
the
have
fuck around.
context for this. Okay,
okay.
cool. Yeah.
But
so how about
did-
Colorado?
I mean, I think in general across the country, you're seeing that restorative justice is like really hot right now, which is really interesting to me. And I think it's mostly being applied in schools. So the way that people are deploying these pilot projects are sort of, trying to test it out with kids because, like, great guinea pigs.
Right.
Kids, why not? Especially black
that's
and brown
the charter
kids.
model.
Yeah, it really, it's like, why not?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And I think there's some that have been done really poorly and some that have been done really well. There's, just to always blow up her spot because she's the best, Miriam Kaba is an abolitionist person based out of New York who's also from Chicago, and she has a number of restorative justice organizations, and she's like the person on this. So if anybody wants to try to do it well, look her up. She's fucking great.
do you want to give some details into like what she's doing, right?
I mean, I think that it's it depends which. So she's more of an abolitionist. She does restorative stuff too, but she's mostly just a sort of an abolitionist, which is gaining a lot of traction right now in general. There was this piece in the New York Times, like people are sort of being introduced to what prison abolition could look like.
Right.
And I think there's so many questions that people get really hung up on when they're considering prison abolition. Basically, everybody's first question immediately is like, but what do we do with the serial killers?
Right.
Daria, what do we do with the serial killers? And it's like fucking infuriating, that question. But
Continue to not catch them.
right. Honestly, yeah. And rapists. People love to just like sort of
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I understand that. I mean, it's sort of my first question.
Of course. It's
yeah.
a natural, like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I get the question. I get why it's the first
Yeah,
question.
but it just is always the first question. I don't think that there's any point in having punitive systems for anything because punishing people is stupid.
Yeah.
But I was just saying, I do understand why people think that, but it's not. But if they, anyway.
And I think that the line that they straddle well, that I think is that it's, you have to be able to acknowledge that harm that is done is real and painful and bad, and that it does incite, like, anybody who's been harmed, like, I've been sexually assaulted, so that means that I understand that when that happens, like, yes, I want vengeance.
Yeah.
Like, I want violence. Like, there is something that's deeply human about that harm. It's that the state should not be making decisions based on
Right.
those.
That's like that is
we
my.
shouldn't be legislating based on like hot-blooded like feelings.
Yeah.
Like those exist in human beings for a reason, but like the whole point of society is to try and like figure out a way to like get past that to a better world. And if we're literally legislating based on like the craziest a person can be, that's insane.
And who suffers under that system, right? It's like we all know, like it's like black and brown people and
Right.
marginalized people are the ones who bear the brunt of our safety, and safety is
Right.
structured around whiteness. Like safety is about protecting whiteness and protecting white property and white
Exactly.
bodies. Like that's what our systems of safety are absolutely founded in.
It's weird that there is something that's like such a specifically, I guess, like for the longest time, like there haven't been that many like mainstream like national stage Democrats who have like but crusaded against or like for abolishing the death penalty, but it's mostly like a right-wing ideology.
Yeah.
And it's weird that there's something that's so strongly tied to right-wing ideology that isn't also just like there. You can't find the obvious capitalist like profit motive in it. It's like an outlier there, but I guess
Yeah.
in a way it's like it's a rallying cry for
It's a symbol. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really politically symbolic act at this point.
And it's a way to kill. I mean, I think that as much as I think that like Justice Scalia probably really believed that he just loves God so much that he has to, protect the death penalty. But I think that most Christian, like most people I know who really, really like the death penalty are old Christian white men. And it's a way that you can still kill black men. And they're like, please, just a few a year. You know what I mean? Because I think that it used to be that you could protect, I think symbolically, like, you used to be able to, if a black guy looked at your wife wrong, you could just kill him. And I think that, like, that generation, like, the reason they are, I mean, they might say racist things, but at the very crux of them, what they really want is that ability to kill black men with impunity.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's the last vestige of that.
Yeah, I mean, the right also just has this allergy to context and an allergy to sociology in general,
Absolutely.
where it's like the idea that like anyone is a statistical entity that like that where there are all these factors going into how they behave or whatever. I mean, it's completely at odds with like
Free will in their minds.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
When I brought up restorative justice, I think other than maybe this was just the fact that it's being tested in schools that made you make this face. But are you seeing it that idea co-opted by like liberals in a way that is maybe not the best? I'm not. This isn't a. I don't have a.
Yeah,
thought
I
about
don't.
this.
I mean, full disclosure. Like, I'm not super involved in a ton of restorative efforts right now. Partially because, I think it is done. It has been done poorly, which is frustrating. And I think that it's such a. I think part of the discomfort that a lot of folks have with these sorts of conversations is that it is. It requires a lot of sort of imagination around picturing an altogether different future and world.
Yeah.
Which is a really uncomfortable process. And I think people love to be pragmatists and people love to be like, well, okay, but let me poke all the holes and this
Right.
isn't going to work and that's not going to work and how are we going to do it? So everything's fucked. Like
Yeah.
people love to do that. I love to do that. I get it. But it's,
The Pod Save America approach.
to
the future.
It's really, it makes you feel really smart.
Yeah, right.
I get
And
it.
safe.
And safe. Yeah.
there are people who
And like you don't have to do anything.
There's a
Right,
whole
yeah.
industry around people who like need to be experts in things,
Yeah.
and those people have like such an imbalance of power in like the discourse of society because
Yeah.
they're the ones who are fucking paid to like put these ideas out there. And I think they purposefully overcomplicate things because they need to feel smart.
Yeah.
And it's
Absolutely.
disgusting.
It is. I completely agree.
And it's like necessarily regressive and conservative because like to put forth the idea that we're capable of like making things better, like you, and that like there are some like simple truths to what we all want out of society. They're giving up so much of their expertise to like, I guess, common decency and like heart. Some like Marianne Williamson shit.
Yeah, it's so yeah, I made a face about restorative justice, but I don't really want to have made that face because I think that even though there's been some like mediocre efforts and there's been some really incredible efforts as well, and I think it's just a messy process right now in terms of changing the whole narrative of how we think about violence because there's pretty broad consensus at this point about drug reform and all kinds of other like really safe things, but people do not want to touch violent crime. Like people do not want to talk about violent crime. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to acknowledge it. And I think that if we can't face violence head on, then I think we don't have a chance at the system. So I think I'm trying to get more comfortable with like the mess of this process, because I have a sense of urgency about it and I want things to be moving faster. But I think that, like, for example, I'll give one that I'm excited about. Okay. Now I'm just like, oh, I have one. In Denver, I'm on a steering committee for a community health program, which is intended to divert cases and 911 calls from the DA's office to a community-run ambulance.
Cool.
So it would deal with drug overdoses in the community and a lot of other sort of smaller, more things that people can deal with a minimal amount of training, and divert those calls away from the police. So I think that's a very good example of like a community-run, localized program that's actively diverting resources from police, which I'm always in favor of, and then sort of thinking about how to take care of each other and be more interdependent in a way that acknowledges vulnerability and pain and violence in a more healthy way, more like public health oriented lens.
Yeah, because even a lot of like not just drug related but violent crimes are public health issues. But I mean, it's hard to say it's public health, but it would be better if someone who was not at all connected to police departments intervened in like domestic violence cases. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, if people aren't showing up guns drawn, it's probably going to alleviate the tension a little bit better.
Whenever I say don't call the cops, people are like, what if a woman's being beaten? And I'm like, okay, obviously yes, because that's the only person you can call. But like, obviously don't call the cops. I think when people say that, they mean like don't call the cops because someone's playing loud music or because someone looks sketchy. But like, there are instances wherein I've only called 911 when there was a building on fire. And like,
that's the fire department. That's like, that's a little better.
But like, I
Shoot
can't.
the building.
And I've called the cops when there was a woman trying to kill herself on the interstate by running into traffic. But, and I think that like those are instances wherein I feel like,
even then it would be better if you could call people.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
The only reason I called I called 911 and it probably went to the cops is all I'm saying. The only reason that I would ever call the cops is for something that would be better handled by someone else is my whole point. But it's like there are some instances where you have to sort of suck it up because you don't want to be responsible by not calling someone and also like you don't want to personally intervene on the interstate type of thing. But
and that's just all a consequence of lack of resources.
There's just a lack of resources, but I wish
like this which I pointed at Daria like your community health initiative. What are you excited about? Like what do you spend the most brain cycles on?
Well, these days I'm starting my PhD in the fall in American Studies, and my topic is I've been sort of obsessed. This is what I've been thinking, but this opens up a whole other thing, so we can also just not.
I love other stuff.
Okay, it's I'm basically writing like a history of innocence and how we've defined innocence over time, and then what that definition has allowed us to do to people we think are guilty, which to me is super related to the serial killer question in terms of. I don't know if you guys have seen like When They See Us or heard all the coverage about it, but there's always multiple times a year, there's these massive stories of exonerations or innocent people. And the only reason people care is because they turned out to have not done anything wrong. Right. And then it's like, we hold them up in this like, and these stories are horrific. Like I would never say that they're not. So there's a lot of people in prison where guilt is not an issue, where it's like, they're not contesting their guilt. And I think when our obsession with innocence and this idea of innocence being sacred and something we need to protect and something that's like revered and biblical and like holy and all this shit, all of those narratives really allow us to fuck over a ton of people, like everybody. And so I think that's what I've been thinking about is I've been really obsessed with innocence as being sort of tied to sin and tied to the body and tied to sexuality and white women and purity and all these things.
And it's so, sorry to cut you off, but it's so individual too. It, like the idea of innocence, like is necessarily, I guess like when you tie it to whiteness, there's like a collective aspect to it, but a lot of the time it just means like this one person is innocent or this one person is guilty, and it holds communities like not accountable at all for like any sort of circumstances.
Why someone held up a gas station and shot a guy in the head in the first place.
Or if once that happens, like how, like are we innocent or guilty in like the way that we handle it?
Right.
Like it completely throws that out the window because it's all on one person.
Right.
And one thing that they did.
And if you say anything defending, like, or not even, I mean, defending the worth of the person, like you're saying, if the guilt's called into question, I feel like most people will just be like, oh, so people should just be able to kill people. What about the man who was killed?
So
what about him?
Like implicit in the logic of like the narrative of the exonerated innocent from death row is like, we should, good thing we didn't kill that guy, and that we are continuing to kill all the other people that
Absolutely.
deserve.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, I don't know. So when have you guys seen When They See Us, or do you know about it?
No.
So it's Ava DuVernay who did Selma, and she's a director. 13th. Yeah. She did the story of the Central Park Five. It's a miniseries on Netflix, and it's beautiful. It's really beautifully done, but you know there is this boogeyman of the real rapist, right? Where it's like, and when you have a figure like that, which you always have in an exonerated case, because there's always the specter of the guilty person who's there, that person is entirely stripped of their humanity in these narratives because they're holding up the innocence of the other people. You know, it's like that's the role they're playing in that story. And that's why I love mitigation, is because it's taking violence, which, I mean, the reason people are so uncomfortable with this is because we have a hard time admitting, I think, that violence is a part of being human, and it's a part of all of us, and that violence is a part of daily life. And it's also, you know, I mean, this is when I start to sound crazy, but it's it's like killing people isn't that hard. Like, it's like one of those things where it's like, I just think that the idea that it's so inconceivable to people, I find a little ridiculous. I don't know. And so I think
it's easy. The more powerful you are, the more likely you are to make decisions that will ultimately kill people. You're just less likely to be the one holding the trigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is I don't know, it's a little bit off topic, but I think the way that we think about violence and innocence in the criminal justice system within our society makes it so much more palatable for us to go to war and things like that when we're already
the idea of like a justified war, a just war.
Yeah, we're just holding, I mean, because people can't name anyone in the countries we're going to war with, and it kind of feels like the same thing. There's just a boogeyman that we get to blame.
Absolutely. And Americans we're obsessed with being historically exonerated, right? Like, American culture is all about being innocent.
Every World War II movie.
Yeah.
Sorry, fuck you, Tom Hanks.
Not even like
for that shit.
Always. Yeah. I mean, it's really, James Baldwin has this amazing quote that I pull from, that I'm obsessed with, where he says, Europeans are afflicted by history, Americans are afflicted by innocence. And it's like, it's really true. Like, we are, white Americans especially, we're so obsessed with our own innocence, and there's so much that's implied in that in terms of like naivete and like all these things where it's like, I didn't know it was gonna hurt them. Like, it's like, fuck you. Yeah. So I think it's the connection between sort of our historical guilt and the guilt of these. It's like there's such an obvious relationship there in terms of how we treat people we think are guilty. And
I mean, we're a society that somehow, like, I feel like even a lot of people that are like to the left of center, or even like to the left of like most people, can somehow justify like dropping an atomic bomb. Like, that's the kind of crazy that we're dealing with.
Do you think that part of the reason that people are resistant to the idea of mitigation is that it involves acknowledging that you are capable of it if you were subject to the same circumstances? Do you think that is a big part, a small part?
It's definitely a part. Yeah. Okay. I think part of this, the visceral satisfaction of punitive systems in general, I think, is getting to further otherize a person you're already motivated to otherize, right? So it's like, these are folks that were systemically already interested in dehumanizing. Right. And so it's just adding another really convenient layer where then you can say, like, if I was poor and black, I would pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I would go to Harvard, and I would, it's like, this is really what white people think, is that we can that if we were in those shoes, we would just be like, well, I would start my own business, and I'm a real upstarter, and I'm this, and it's like, I just think people are I think people are deeply uncomfortable with the idea that there's that violence is present in all of us, especially in American culture. It's like, Jesus. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it.
So you're researching the concept of innocence. Do you have any sort of feel on alternative ideological models for like responsibility or
not yet. I want to, for sure. Okay. I think there's so much there in terms of just, I'm pretty much satisfied with the American historical aspect right now because there's so much bullshit that I'm just like, wow. But what comes to mind is I did work on some death penalty cases in Malawi, and I think in cultures that are more communitarian in terms of like tribe-based or community-based, there is a different kind of responsibility about allowing that person to return to the community and what that could look like and the conditions that need to be present for that to be possible. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think culturally America is very interested in people returning home.
Right.
Yeah, I think
there's not a lot of space for that. When you look at the philosophies behind punishment, you realize that they're actually completely devoid of any meaning or intent. They don't make communities safer. They don't make individuals safer. They don't make
They tear communities apart.
Yeah, in fact, the opposite. Yeah.
Right.
And it's interesting because when you really break down, like, okay, what is this about? That's why people are like serial killers, because it's like, it just feels like the scale is like, well, okay, but safety is a real. It's like people have this idea of our narratives of safety are so warped. So warped.
And it's also extremely suggestive of like the lengths that you have to go to justify the current state of affairs. Like you have to go to the 0.001 percentile case to even have any chance of justifying the status quo. Mm-hmm. Do you guys want to take a break to turn on the AC and pee and get a drink?
I would do that.
All right.
Yeah, great.
Do you want to keep talking about your work? Do you want to just hang out for a little bit?
Whatever you
I
guys
want to ask you one more thing.
Okay, I can.
Maybe more piss talk.
I can do my best with the piss talk. I don't have any like fun piss stories. I have a lot of like other bodily fluid stories, but not piss. Isn't one of my.
You have two brothers.
I have technically 5 brothers, 3 brothers, 2 stepbrothers.
Okay, yeah.
Enough boys in my life.
Enough boys. There's got to be some, like someone tickling someone till they peed or something. No,
it's not fun though. It's not. I don't know. I want better than that.
I mean, cruelty that ends with like accidental bodily fluids is like always pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah, I have a story about getting exposure therapy to cure my fear of throwing up. It's a good.
Oh yeah,
it's a good one.
Wait, how does that look?
Yeah,
I can tell you all about.
We're live.
All right,
go for it.
So, man, fuck. I guess I'm really sure we can do this. So
you don't have to do anything.
No, it's fine. This is good for me. This
is part of the therapy.
Yeah, honestly, she'd be really proud. So it started with a fear of flying, and I had a really traumatic flight in college. It was a very small plane from Spokane to Walla Walla, Washington. I was on my way to a scholarship interview for college, and the plane was Whitman, yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey,
my first love went to Whitman.
I think I know who that is.
She plays the cello.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cute. So yeah, I was on my way to a scholarship interview, and the plane was crazy. People were throwing up all around me. People were crying. Like, it was like a fucked up flight. And then the whole time, this old lady was just talking my ear off, and then she was like, "You don't look so good." And I was like, "I feel terrible." Stop talking. So then I got off the plane and immediately threw up. And for some reason, I had trouble flying after that for a while. Yeah. And then it was like fine for years. Like, there was just like, I would just kind of cry every time I got off a plane. I just it's terrible. Yeah. But I was fine. And then for some reason, I think just as, all of our collective anxieties, I'm sure over the last few years have just kind of, peaked up, spiked. And then it just became this thing where I just was like, thought I was going to throw up literally all the time. Like, I was like, I was like, if I eat, I'm going to throw up. If I go like on a date, I'm going to throw up.
And you're a very flying in planes kind of person.
I fly
If you
so
look
much.
at Benjamin's disgusting watermelon-filled mustache, you're going to throw up.
you got a little dingleberry there.
Benjamin has 2 dog penises hanging from his mouth.
Oh, God. Oh no.
Nobody can see this, but I'm having so much fun.
Oh my god. You look like a walrus.
I'm gonna go outside.
Like a carnivorous.
And there's just gonna be a hive of bees that goes directly to my face. Just sting me. This watermelon juice is amazing, though.
So good.
It's really good.
So anyway, it came up. It was really bad. My mom is a psychologist too, so she was just like, "You have anxiety," and I was like, "No, I just don't like eating as much anymore, and I don't like going outside, and I don't like dating."
You also
These
have
are normal
two
things.
psychologist moms.
I do.
Right? Yeah,
too.
that's,
Yeah.
Man,
My
that's
dad is
fucked.
also a psychologist.
God, that's fucked.
It's all fucked. It's really rough. Anyway, so my
On
mom,
top of being Jewish. Like,
yeah, arise ye children of psychiatrists. Anyway, so yeah, my mom just diagnosed me left and right. So finally I saw a therapist who, I think her name is Claire de la Claire.
Awesome. Hell yes.
She's
That's amazing.
a hero.
burlesque dancer.
She's a hero.
Yeah.
I love her. And straight up, she would just make me like try to throw up in front of her, basically.
Holy shit.
So
Like,
I would.
What a
hang
No,
on,
baller.
not like that. I would sit on the floor of her office with a trash can.
Oh, she was basically like, prove it. If you're going to
Yeah.
throw up all the time,
Yeah,
fucking prove
exactly.
it to me. Yeah.
And then she'd just sit there and she'd be like, "Daria, you don't look so good. Oh, you look sick." I think
Dude.
she'd be like, "I think you're gonna throw up."
This is
you
like
a dominatrix.
You went
You
to
didn't do that.
Yeah, this is
like
amazing.
old school,
Yeah.
like CBT.
Well,
Yeah,
Gestalt.
well, it's like straight up. It's like.
Isn't
the
that Gestalt?
idea with anxiety in general is that like you just have to fucking face it. So like just do the thing
Yeah.
and then you won't be scared of it, which is like fucking worked, man.
Yeah,
it's
that's
amazing.
awesome.
So I had to like put water in my mouth and like pretend to throw it up in front of her. and,
Dude,
like,
what an
all kinds of
awesome
crazy
lady.
shit. I know. I was like, you have the coolest job in the fucking world. so then, because the other thing with this particular phobia is that like most people enable it because if you are like, oh, I feel kind of sick, people are like, oh, have a glass of water, like
Right.
sit down, like don't worry
Right.
about it.
Oh, so it
What
makes
you're
you feel like
supposed
it's valid.
yeah, exactly. It tells your brain that like danger, and so what you're supposed to be like is like, okay, well, there's a trash can there, like you can throw up if you need to,
Yeah.
like fucking throw up. And so now I've trained my family to do it. Like it's so funny. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's very sweet.
Yeah,
They-
everybody's just like, all right, go throw up if you have to. See
Yeah.
you later. And I'm just like, okay, this is fine. It's not a big deal. It's all
Yeah.
good.
When
Totally.
when you do have you been sick to the point that you had to throw up since this all happened in the first place?
I think so. Yeah, once. I think. Yeah.
A
And
really long time ago, when we were like still in high school, Luke was like way too fucked up, and he was like about to start vomiting, and he was like dry heaving, and he like couldn't get it out. So this was at a party. I just went like over near him and just started going like.
Now it's probably a good time to say, Daria, if you don't want us to talk about puke right now, we don't have
No,
to.
I'm good, guys.
Are you
That's
like
the thing.
other
cured?
people puking
I'm fucking
doesn't
good.
bother you?
No, that's the thing. None of it bothers me now.
None of it bothers
That's
you now.
amazing.
Because,
Yeah.
like, I've been cured.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible,
Go therapy.
right? It's fucking. Great.
When Deja and I
Sorry to cut you
took
No, I was just doing dry heave noises.
Which we
You
did at the
also
end of the
said,
last
sorry
episode.
to cut you off to me.
Yeah.
While you were cutting off Mary. Yeah. So,
Well, I don't worry about Mary Devin. She can handle her shit.
fuck
speaking
you
of
for
handling
that.
my shit, I was
No,
the
you can
only
too.
I was the only
I'm the only one who
person
can't.
who did not fuck
it.
up when we robo-tripped. And do y'all want to know how many Welltussin pills I took? 19.
I literally don't know
I
what
took-
any of the words you just said.
Robo-tripping. So we did.
you weren't
we
as
took
cool
generic,
as us in high school.
No, this
DXM,
was
the active ingredient in Robitussin.
freshman year of college. We were huge losers.
Well, if you do that and you also take Dramamine with it, you have some
Jesus
crazy
fucking
hallucinations.
Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Dextromethorphan?
Yeah.
Something like
So we did trip, but it's not a good trip. You just like feel like you're dying and
Yeah.
your liver is just absolutely obliterated
Yeah.
from it. But anyway, so Deja kept puking, and her boyfriend at the time was one of those drug people that like would just be actively puking and be like, "It's all right, man, you're on a drug. It's normal." And I'm like, "There's blood coming out of my eyes," and he's like, "It's just a drug, man." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"At some point, this is bad." And he took 26, so he was just vomiting pretty much the entire time. I was just tripping balls watching everyone vomit, and I never vomited. But Deja, at one point, I could tell she was going to puke. We were in the middle of the living room, and I went like this, and I held out my
That
hand.
is the most sweetest thing I ever did here
And it
in my
did
whole
not
life.
help.
Yeah.
She just like puked into my hands, and it still went all over the ground.
course.
Yeah,
And then I
that
was just
adds
like,
up.
bloop.
Onto the ground or
No,
into
into
the
the
sink?
sink, yeah.
Oh, was this in East Laville?
No, this was in her boyfriend's apartment where he
okay.
lived with. He lived with a bunch of other people that didn't go to college. Yeah.
Man, this is like
Not that
piss,
there's anything
vomit,
wrong
and
with that.
death penalty. That's like,
Yeah.
that is a trifecta right there.
That's actually the Holy Trinity in Catholicism. Yeah.
Oh man. Anyway,
It's really fucked up.
I have some good vomiting stories.
I bet
I
you
do too, but we can, I think we don't
I
need
don't,
to.
because I'm a shit person, as we've
Yeah.
gone
Oh,
over.
yeah,
but
you're- yeah.
You and Jeff Gaucher.
Yeah,
you were
Jeff
with me.
also
No,
vomits.
Jeff's a vomit person.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. You're right.
You
I'm
don't
thinking
know.
myself. When I got accidentally extremely crossfaded, I like I'm trying to but anyway, like I like I don't know. I was on vacation with my family and I was very drunk and my sister's boyfriend was like, "Hey, would you like some of this weed?" And I said, "No, but I love you." So yes. Anyway, I was obliterated. I felt amazing. The best I've ever felt. Like opioid, second only to opioids, the best I've ever felt. And like just kind of staggered into the house and like managed to avoid people. And then I barely remember this, but throwing up into the sink because I'm an idiot. Like the toilet was right there and it was immaculate. It was a good toilet. And I just ignored it. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh no, like I just left a horrible mess in the bathroom. And I went and checked. It was like 6 a.m. and her boyfriend had cleaned it all up.
Oh my god.
What a sweetheart.
Angel.
That's so nice.
Sweet boy.
One time, my friend, again in high school, I think my parents were gone for like 10 minutes or something. So I was like, all right, all of my friends come do drugs in my house. And I have a friend who I think took Molly and like 2CI or something at the
Yeah.
same time.
Ooh, that
And
designer
then
shit.
became the craziest person I've ever seen, and just like with someone doing a bad performance of the Joker smile on her face.
Oh god.
Just
You were like afraid of her? Yeah.
just sprayed an even coat of puke all across my fucking kitchen. And then just like laughed about it and then went outside and I was like, I guess I'm cleaning all of this up.
Like
and somehow
Exorcist
forgiving
style.
you because
Right,
like you're
yeah.
being I don't know.
Well, you told her to come over and do drugs.
Yeah, well,
It's
my
your
parents
fault, for
shouldn't
sure.
have.
Gone to the grocery
Yeah.
store.
You want to know how I got these Xan bars?
Oh my.
Mom, if you don't want me to do heroin, you shouldn't go to work anymore. Okay?
Stop
my
providing for me.
Yeah.
Man. Nothing makes me feel like more of a noob than talking about drugs with you. Which is like, what?
Well, I only have a couple things I know about. So.
Deep knowledge. Deep knowledge. Yeah.
I guess I did want to ask you one more thing.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, back to bummer time.
Great.
Well, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be, but
I could make it fun
it
for you.
it seems like there's definitely a failure on the left to center. I guess like people talk about prison reform, but a lot of it's just like we should decriminalize drugs and things like
Right.
that. But there's like a failure to talk about like the actual violence of it and the
Right.
death penalty specifically as like part of the platform, part of
Yeah.
the agenda. Do you think there are ways that could actually help the left gain some popularity if they like took that issue?
Took the death penalty on in particular.
Yeah.
I've thought about this a lot because I've been trying to wrestle with why it's such a politically unpopular thing to like go after right now for liberals when criminal justice reform is so hot in general. Liberals are not excited by the death penalty. Like it really is
I
just
don't even think that many like leftists.
leftists.
are.
Like people
are quiet
people
about
just
it. They might
don't-
believe it, but they're not like.
but it's not. People are not going for it.
Yeah.
And I think it is partially because, from a harm reduction perspective, the death penalty impacts so few people as compared to folks who are in prison in general, right?
And if you focus on the death penalty, it's the implication that like that's the problem, right?
Yeah, and I think the true thing is too that in terms of the grenades that right wing politicians throw in is that when you talk about the death penalty, immediately people go into the facts of the crime of various offenses, and that's just like in terms of legislatively, that's like game over, right?
Yeah.
That's it because then people bring up victims' family members. They bring up the offenses. They read out
Right.
the wounds of the bodies. Like, it's like all the gruesome things that people sort of get off on hearing about, frankly,
Right.
that are like that people love
Yeah,
to
it's true
engage
crime.
with voraciously, right?
Right.
It's like
SVU
that's the shit that
yeah.
gets centered. That's what the conversation becomes about, which is so frustrating. And I think there is a way to have that conversation without letting that be the game that's being played. But I think I have been really disappointed by leftists and by quote unquote progressives for not taking on this issue really ever. Like, people just are not interested in it.
So your argument there was about like strategy and how like strategically it can be unproductive to talk about the death penalty.
Yeah.
Were you talking about like people personally just like not giving enough of a shit? Because I have thoughts about that.
No, I don't think that wasn't what I was bringing.
Okay.
But I do want to hear what you have to say. I think what I was maybe leaning towards was that, like, there is a possibility to take on an issue this bold and, like, say that there is, like, a full, like, moral stance to, like, I don't know. It seems important.
There is.
Like,
It is. It absolutely is.
because
I
if
think
you're going to be
yeah.
brave enough to, like, say that, like, we can fight climate change and we can, like, take down, like, the most powerful corporations in the world and, like, we can actually create a society where people care for each other, like, I think you have to have some sort of idealistic, like, moral component to that. And it seems like taking on the hardest things to take on is, like, a show of strength with that.
I agree. I think that it's just like a politically toxic issue in a lot of ways for a lot of people to take on. And I think some of that has to do with people not caring about people who are in prison, especially for these really violent offenses. It's just, I mean, some of it is just that, like, people don't want to go to bat for murderers in their minds, right? Like, it's like, I think that it's a leap. And when you're talking about, bold action, these big structural things that I think are gaining traction in terms of how the conversation is shifting, at least, it is, I think it's just, people aren't prepared for the nuance of the conversation, really. Like, I just don't think I think that it's, when you have the supposed worst of the worst that's at the center of the death penalty, these crimes that at once people are fascinated with, but then also just don't want to deal with. Like, we're just not prepared to deal with it. As even leftists are not prepared to deal with how to talk about violence and violent crime. Because I cannot tell you the number of leftists who gobble up the fucking true crime podcasts and, like, love reading books about serial killers, and, like, all of that fascination is absolutely there, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing on its own. But I
think it probably is.
I mean, it doesn't have to be without all the other stuff, but when you don't, but I think that I've been really interested in that it feels like people who I'd expect to take on this issue are sort of, I think the violence that's just a part of this issue is just not something people are really ready to deal with.
Do you think
this is probably something that I'm not going to find a whole lot of common ground with that many people on?
Great.
But it seems like there are people who are, like, leftists or even progressives who are anti-war and pro-veteran, and it seems like you can apply a lot of the same sort of thinking to that.
Absolutely.
And, like, it's
100%.
like, I think there's, like, a cowardice to having that stance and not being able to go to bat for people in your own fucking country who have gone through similar things.
Absolutely. I also think part of it is just in terms of, like, why I think there's so much political apathy about the death penalty in general, is that I just don't think that on the scale of things, it just doesn't arise the same level of passion for some reason for people. And I think that it's just because it's not even that, part of it is that I don't think there's actually that many right-wing folks who are willing to, like, really advocate for the death penalty, right? So it's like, in terms of the opposition forces, it's not like there's this really vocal contingent. There's a very, very small contingent of people who are willing to, like, be like, oh, I love the death penalty. It accomplishes the following things. But, like, that's really vanishingly rare at this point, honestly. And so I think without that, too, the way politics are so performative now, I just think without the absence of, like, a foe that's sort of willing to be like, kill people, like, I just don't think it arises as much motivation.
I also just can't imagine left discourse without the pathologization of the right in terms of, like, sociopathy and shit.
Exactly.
And like talking about I don't know, like Richard Spencer, like, oh, we should fucking guillotine the shit out of that dude.
People love talking about the guillotine
Yeah,
on Twitter.
I mean,
It's
it's and maybe I'm like just too online, but I really think that like you can't until we were talking about like you were talking about like feeling like you are capable of violence under certain circumstances, and that a lot of people are resistant to that thought. I think a lot of the left is really resistant to the idea that if they had power and money, that they might behave the same way, and that it's like, I don't know.
Behave what way? Behave what?
Sociopathically, or just like, or monstrously, like.
What does that have to do with them talking about the guillotine? It seems like they're acknowledging their ability to be monstrous.
No. I just mean monstrous specifically in terms of like protecting their interests. Like they have $10 million and they have like a kid and they like agitate against the estate tax or like I don't know,
right?
Like that sort of thing. And
they become property owners and don't want to
exactly. and I don't think that there is a vocal. There's going to be a vocal contingent of the left that's anti-death penalty until the rhetoric isn't pathologizing and damning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
not
like down with billionaires, but just like
I think it's one of those things where if you do take up that cause and you have a clear outline for like why it's important for individuals, communities, and just like as like a powerful imagery that we all look to in society, if you take that up vocally, people really have to show their face. Mm-hmm. Like, there's really no argument besides like fry 'em, and that's fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's like I think you need to make people say that, and like I think that is something that could like be a rallying cry to like have people address like the underlying violence of the criminal justice system aside from just the fact that it's like not just and like it's racist and it's exploitative in like
right.
a way that hurts people's pockets too.
Yeah. I also think just in terms of the politics of now, I think there is such a it's hard to be shocked at this point by things in terms of like just the constant onslaught of violence that is happening at every level, especially in terms of detention. Like immigration obviously has blown up in terms of how detention is operating in this country, and I think that the death penalty is really invisible in a lot of ways. Executions get no press coverage at this point. Like people,
and there's no excuse at this point because there's so few.
There's right. Yeah, there's very few, then it's just like it's not covered. People don't seem to really care about them when they do happen, unless the person's potentially innocent, right? And then it's like outrage, but not even really. It's like kind of, but I just think there's the exhaustion, the political exhaustion is so real, and the brutality is so real that I just think the death penalty is sort of invisible right now.
It's very sanitized too, because when people talk about lethal injection, they make it seem like it's like, I don't know,
medical.
Right.
Yeah. That's by design, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we work really hard at, is helping people realize that lethal injection is just as brutal as every other. It's killing someone.
Right.
It's not putting your pet to sleep. It's not, it's a very different process.
And it's still, even if they...
It's not Kevorkian. Like, there's no compassion there. It's fucking brutal and punitive. And, like, people are, like, getting off on it. I don't think there's really any other way to talk about it besides, like, bloodlust.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, on that note, do you have anything that you want to plug? Your projects or other projects?
No,
Twitter accounts.
I don't think I have anything.
Well, I guess.
What
Do you have any advice for just someone who's not going to take this up as like a professional fight for them? Like, what should people do? How should people talk about this? Like, what are practical steps towards making this, towards abolishing the death penalty?
Sure.
And like everything that goes along with that.
I think I'm trying to find this website that I think is a great starter. I think it's just called transformharm.org maybe, or .com. But there are a lot of resources out there. I think reading everything Mariame Kaba has ever written is great.
Spell her last name.
Kaba.
Okay.
I am going to read a book. I've decided.
Oh, love it.
Can you give me back the book that you borrowed?
I only have 100 pages left.
Okay. How long have you had it?
I just read like 40 pages 2 nights ago.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How many pages is the book?
256.
You know the exact number of pages.
It's transformharm.org.
.org. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
We love you.
Bye.